on investment for sampling every household rather than a random sample of households.
I guess I'll ask the question again. How much is the cost to send it to everybody in our city without all of the other?
I don't have that number in front of me. I would have to look at print and mail and email appends to see what the difference in cost would be.
It's more than we budgeted. We budgeted for a random sample, but.
Right, budget can be amended.
Sure,
I guess I'm just curious what the difference in cost would be between sending it to the sample size and sending it to everyone. I mean, if it's so important to us that we want to know, we want to hear from everyone, what's the cost of hearing from everyone?
So I want to push back a little bit on
And I'm
the
not
notion.
saying that they're all going to respond, but they're given the opportunity to see the sample, to see the survey and respond. At that point, it's their decision to make to send it back in.
Understood. I completely understand the concern, and I want to just talk a little bit about statistical sampling versus sort of a census coverage approach. So we would see we would be more likely to see biases in the sample of those residents who seek to participate in a survey than those that we randomly invite. So we can open the survey to the full general public after the scientific fielding has concluded and allow room for that participation among anyone who was not scientifically selected, and see how those participation patterns might vary or how the response patterns might vary. But actually going out and inviting a random subset of residents who may or may not be inclined to seek that participation with the city initially on their own has proven to be a more cost-effective way to accurately measure the broad view of public opinion. Again, happy to provide an avenue that would allow this to be distributed through social media channels or from the city's website, that would allow any interested residents who weren't scientifically selected to participate after the fact. But we're confident that a statistically valid random sample of city residents represents the city as a whole, unless we have overwhelming reason to believe that those who weren't selected to participate are systematically different from those who are selected to participate. We represent our residents across a variety of demographic and socioeconomic dimensions, so we're pretty confident that our results are statistically valid at the end of the day. But I'm happy to ensure that there are avenues for everyone who's interested to participate in this survey as well.
But if I might say that it's completely two different methodologies.
Yes.
And so we could get costs if you want to know the cost of what it would be, but the methodology would be different.
Yep, that's correct.
And we'd have to make a decision on whether that methodology going out to everyone versus the random sample, if that's.
Well, to me, as a lay person, it's, again, just wanting something that's statistically valid. The information we have, we can trust. If it's random or it's not random, is it statistically valid as far as feedback?
I hear you, Mayor, but I'm going to push back a little bit.
Sure,
As a resident, I want to feel like my opinion is valued and I want to participate in the survey. If I'm not picked in that random survey, I'm a little bit miffed. I want to be able to provide my feedback if I choose to. And it sounds like that could potentially happen by a hybrid approach as you just described. You get your statistical sample first and then you can go out and get something second.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, and we've provided that option for a variety of our municipal clients as sort of the political midway compromise point, so that we have, that statistically valid sample and then that opportunity for other residents to participate. I'm happy to provide costs as a follow-up to this meeting if that's desired, but our primary objective between those two surveys would be to look at how that sample that's statistically valid and represents the city broadly differs from those residents who actively seek out participation in the survey through social media or from the city's website. We find that those residents who are most involved and actively engaged and seek out those opportunities without receiving an explicit invitation that is personally addressed to their address or email address they tend to be those residents that have a particular issue or investment in something specific in the city. They have a bone to pick, or they have someone that they really, really want to praise. I think you hear from fewer of those citizens in city council meetings, but I could be wrong. But they tend to be the particularly issue-invested public that are participating at will, whereas our sample of the city, we're confident, represents the broad general citizen base. But again, happy to provide that sort of in-between compromise option, if that's helpful.
If I may just add, because I've been involved in these types of surveys before, I was involved in a community where we opened it up to the whole citizenry to try to get everyone's input, and were significantly criticized, especially by the academic world of that community that we were in, because it wasn't scientifically a random sample, and you were just getting more input from those, like Kyrie was just saying, were biased. So my only point with that, I'm not saying that we couldn't do that, my only point is, I've been criticized on the other side of things because you're not getting accurate data, because you're just getting the most vocal people that are responding rather than a random sample.
You're allowing those particular.
The hybrid.
Hybrid's a
provide-
little different.
The hybrid gives you you to express your interest in.
Yeah.
I don't know about Mike or Councilman or Bruce, but then it also gets to the heart of my concern, which is like, I just like to know feedback. I
Yeah.
just think that everybody should, if we're gonna do a survey, like, and because some of these questions, the way they're written and asked, I don't know, I struggle with. So maybe if we can get some of the questions down, maybe I'd feel better, but as of right now, I don't.
I've done both in my career with some master plan efforts. We've sent out a postcard to every single resident in Salt Lake Valley. And the first time we did that, we had a hard time getting responses from all segments of the valley. We did one area that would give us 30% back, another area would give us 5% back. So we had to do it again, and we had to incentivize it by giving free gifts or put your name in a drawing if you would send back your thing. And it was really tough because but you can come back and through cross tabulation you can find out if you've got a good sampling by age, by sex, by all those different things. But you can do that. So,
Absolutely.
so I see the value of both. This is one of those, there's a lot.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, to that point, the approach that we generally recommend where there is a concern that some group of residents might feel left out if they're not included in the random sample is that we can provide a pretty low cost option that allows us to administer an open access version of the survey after the scientific fielding period has concluded. So if that's of interest, we can discuss that after this meeting.
But if I may ask, how do you reconcile then the 2 points of data?
So those two data sets are handled entirely separately. We only report on the scientifically valid, statistically sampled portion. The other sample is, we'll provide just sort of a top line report and you can draw comparisons, but we don't guarantee statistical validity. We don't set a particular sample target. So however many residents respond during the fielding period that it's open is how many we get. We don't do any reminders for that version of the survey. That would be entirely at the city's jurisdiction. So as far as our reporting and any conclusions that we present, anything that we see as a key finding or a priority for residents, that would be gathered from that scientific sample. This other data point would just be simply for the basis of comparison and inclusion. Any other questions about process before we get into the questionnaire that's in front of us?
So again, educate the layperson how you obtain your sample.
Yes. So we take a random sample of voters in the city. There's some discussion of whether we should do residents or registered voters, and that's kind of up for debate. But in Cottonwood Heights, our registered voter population is quite high, so that's considerable coverage. And at this table, most of you answer most directly, not that your non-voting residents aren't taxpayers, but They are the ones who hold you accountable on election day. So for both decision-making purposes and for some cost-benefit analysis there as well, we'll be taking a random sample of registered voters in the city. That registered voter population, we tend to get slightly better response rates because our address records are more up to date. We tend to have higher email coverage when we have more of that information about who these residents are. So random sample of registered voters in the city of Cottonwood Heights. They will receive an invitation either via printed mail through the post or to an email address if we're able to append an active valid email to their name and address through a consumer data warehouse. The survey will be open for generally a week to 10 days, depending on the response rates that we get. We'll send an initial invitation and 2 reminders via email. For the printed mail invitations, we'll generally just send 1 invitation and occasionally a reminder postcard if our response rates are struggling. That's not a problem we had in Cottonwood Heights the last time we did this, so I would be surprised if that were a necessary measure. So again, that survey would be in the field for 7 to 10 days, and we would ensure that our sample is representative across a variety of demographic and socioeconomic variables. After which we will take the survey out of the field and do some data analysis and reporting on our end and come back to you with the results of the responses to each question. Any additional questions of the day?
So we were just at a Utah League of City and Towns training, and they wowed us with their survey techniques.
Mm-hmm.
Like an interactive yes or no, and then it branches out and
Yeah.
tells more. Do you guys have that capability?
We do. We actually advised on that League of Cities and Towns survey.
Oh, cool.
So
It was impressive.
I'm glad.
This didn't reflect that.
Yeah, so this is just a Word document for review of content specifically. This will be programmed in an online interactive platform, so if residents respond to a survey in a certain way or to a question in a certain way, they could be directed to answer a different follow-up question than someone who answered something differently. Any other questions process-wise? Okay. So the general flow of our survey here, and then I'm happy to get into specifics. We start off with introductory questions that look at the city and residents' experience on a high level. We tend to start broad and then get more specific. So you'll notice these first couple pages worth of questions are pretty general. We then get into some city service evaluations and benchmarks of those city services and how residents interact with the city. We look at communication and information flow in the city, and then look at some specific city initiatives that we've discussed with city staff. After that, we get to sort of the demographics section at the
12 to 15, did you say?
yes.
I just had it printed out.
I don't have any other printed copies. We just have them on the screen in front of us. Sorry. Okay, so I'll just start going through from the top here, and then feel free to stop me if you have any questions at any point. So on page 1, again, we have some of these warm-up questions. We want to ensure that the participants that we're talking to do still live in the city, so some of those for whom we have email addresses may have moved. We want to make sure that we screen those people out. The second question, just overall right direction, wrong direction, sort of a baseline gut feeling about the city. And then average quality of life rating on a 100-point scale. General approval of elected officials, so Cottonwood Heights Mayor and City Council. And then how residents would rate the city today compared to 5 years ago, whether it has gotten better or worse, or if they don't have much of a reference point for that long. We then ask a few open-ended questions here on page 2. So what do you like most about living in Cottonwood Heights? What's the most important issue facing the city today? And what's the most important issue facing the city in the next 3 to 5 years? We then ask a pretty standard market research question: how likely are you to recommend the city to friends and family as a good place to live? And then how do you rate the service you received for your tax dollar? Now onto page 3, we start to get a little bit more specific. So we're asking residents to agree or disagree with some of these statements. Overall, I feel safe living in Cottonwood Heights. Cottonwood Heights is a great place to raise a family. Cottonwood Heights provides all the services I think it should provide. Cottonwood Heights has all of the kind of businesses I want it to have. Overall, I think Cottonwood Heights does a good job managing city services, and Cottonwood Heights is growing and developing in a positive way. They're presented with a 5-point agree or disagree scale for each of those statements.
I have a question here.
Yes.
And this is a little bit, I don't know, controversial, but as a city, tonight we will be passing a resolution about sustainability.
Mhm.
And I know in the previous draft, we had a sustainability question here. And it's not there anymore.
You know,
So I'm just questioning,
Yeah.
so my question is, if this would be the appropriate location for a question, if residents support the city, you can't be relying 100% on renewable energy by.
That's their.
right.
it's
I
their-
think
Yeah.
that's further down in the survey. Yeah.
Oh, okay, it's in there, all right, because it was there
Um,
before, okay, maybe I missed it again.
Nope, that's all right. I'm scanning back
Okay.
through to make sure that I'm not
There's
misspeaking,
multiple
but
questions on that.
All right.
yeah, I thought we had a couple in there. So.
At least three.
So these are just sort of general
But if you're
questions
thinking
before we
about
look at.
sustainability in general more broadly, that's not there.
Well, that's what I was.
So we have a question on the next page that just says, you know, the city of Cottonwood Heights passed a resolution earlier this year with the goal of having city functions running on renewable energy resources by 2030. Do you support or oppose?
I think the mayor's question was broader than that. There's, sustainability is one thing, and renewable energy I see as a subset of sustainability. So I don't know if that's what you were trying to get at there, but I mean, there's two different things.
I just want our citizens' feedback as to their feelings on sustainability and renewable energy. And if that's in there already, then I'm fine.
Will we get back to that question, because I think there's some
Yes.
question about how it's phrased that's not clear.
Yeah, on this renewable energy question or
Yeah.
the previous
The-
statements?
the-
Okay.
So when
Yeah,
we get there,
let's talk about it.
Yeah,
No, let's
we
go
can-
now.
we
That's
can
fine.
just
We
make
can
sure
jump
that-
back.
Let's keep going.
Let's,
order.
let's keep, let's get
Okay.
in order
Yeah.
together.
Okay,
Everyone jump
sounds
in.
good. Were there any questions or comments about those sort of agree, disagree statements then? Okay. The next set of questions looks at trust and transparency. So in your view, how much of the time do Cottonwood Heights city administrators and staff do a good job of promoting laws and policies that serve the community's best interest, handle resources available to them in a responsible way, and provide fair and accurate information to the public? Any questions about those statements? We then move to a specific individual city service evaluation section. So on a 0 to 100 scale, rate your satisfaction with each of these services. I think we have a fairly comprehensive list here with this first section looking at services that the city provides directly, and this second set of services looking at those that the city contracts with other entities to provide. Now, this isn't to say that these are all of the services that the city provides to residents, but those that they interact with on a regular basis and would be familiar
So
enough
a
to raise.
question on this,
Yeah.
the second set,
Yes.
that talks about city recreation fitness programs, is it misleading that it calls them city, even though they're within the city, they're not sponsored by the city?
That's a good question. I think we've distinguished to say that the city is contracting with another agency to provide these programs.
We're not.
But, okay, well, if it's helpful to remove that designation, we certainly could.
Before that, it seems like we're gonna have a pretty big debate here over the next several months about, well, about a lot of things, but about stormwater.
Yeah.
And we don't ask a question about stormwater here, and maybe not anywhere else either. Most residents don't have a great sense of how we're doing with stormwater. But,
Probably not.
Is there a possibility to educate the public at the same time as we're taking a survey?
We have to be pretty cautious. Surveys are poor educational tools. There are some things that we can do in the way a question is phrased to provide a little bit of contextual information, but in terms of using the survey as a broad educational campaign, it's not effective, and we tend to get a lot of pushback if we try too hard.
This is a good example of where we have tried to do that, this very question, where we split the city-provided services from the others and try to educate that we're talking about things that are different.
We don't contract with them.
Yeah, that's probably true. Is there,
I guess a
Maybe
question,
we said-
sorry, one question on that list of topics. So, water conservation efforts, I know, Tim, I guess this question is for you.
Yeah.
Water conservation efforts, I know we are involved in some programs with like Jordan River, blah, 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 right? I just remember going to the zoo with my daughter and Cottonwood Heights was there talking about stormwater and how we should think about, we put on our driveways and spray into our
Right.
stormwater, like that kind of stuff is, I'm sorry, I don't know what conservation efforts the city is doing right now.
Well, that's a service also that Salt Lake City that provides our water does something not directly. So it's a service that's not necessarily,
Is that us or someone else?
Is
I guess
that
I
the
was-
first set of
It's in
questions?
the first set of questions, and I think, my gosh.
yeah, I see what you're saying.
Mhm.
Yeah, beyond those things that we're doing, like at the zoo, our public works department, we are doing much more than that. So if that's something we wanna pull out, we can do that. I think that was probably in there in the previous survey as well, that's why
that's correct.
that's why it was.
I'm with you, I don't have any idea of anything we're doing about water conservation efforts.
Okay. We can certainly trim the list down if that's not helpful.
But that almost
At the
ties
time.
to renewable resources and sustainability, that whole category, I mean, true lay citizen.
Yeah.
Well, you can ask a question to that extent, but I think.
Renewable energy and sustainability.
And water
Include that in there.
conservation, yeah. Because,
Could.
Is that what we wanna do with this? You see Irene's typing.
Yeah, I'm gonna take notes, so.
we just,
If we don't have a specific program, or I think we should take it out.
yeah.
So it's
There's not
districts or
anything-
agencies or us.
There's nothing you can evaluate there.
We're implying that we're doing something, water conservation.
I would take that out.
I would too.
And on the other list, how can we phrase city recreation and fitness programs to be specific to the rec center? Is there a term we can use in the question that points people to that?
Well, let me just give you my input on that. You could just get rid of the term city, because in the pre-part of the question actually says other agencies provide some services. You could just get rid of city and say recreation service.
Or you could say
Recreation.
community recreation.
Yeah.
program.
You
But
could do that.
I think my interest there is, and maybe the same as Tally's, is to tie people's mind that what we're talking about here are the services provided by the rec center.
Yeah,
That's what we mean.
yeah, we do.
That is the other agency we're talking about.
Well, I guess you could expand that thinking, it could also be,
The county.
well, no, it could be, we have private providers of recreation services. You soccer, you football, you, all those things too. So does that incorporate all of those programs?
Could we put in parentheses, this is a non-city owned facility? Be like the first time a lot of citizens ever realized that.
So we tried to address it, and if this doesn't work, it doesn't work, but we try to address it in the question that says some are provided directly by the city and others are provided by districts or agencies.
I understand, but if you just said recreation and fitness programs offered by the Cottonwood Heights Rec Center, then you'd know the answer.
Yeah.
You know what you were talking about specifically.
But that is very specific, but that excludes the other, programs in our community that are what we call patron sponsored. You would probably have a dozen of those.
So I guess the question that I would pose along those lines is, if the city were to find that the rec center programs were overwhelmingly popular, but the patron-sponsored programs were not, would that change the way the city approaches anything, or is there a decision point in front of us with this data?
Because typically, if the community said that the recreation center or service area programs were highly successful and had a very positive feedback, and patron sponsor didn't, typically communities who, it's like Little League Baseball, it's sponsored by patrons. And public recreation will try and encourage the patrons to lead out and sponsor that, so we don't have the cost of development. If patrons are not doing a good job, then it could fall back to the city or the rec center to try and facilitate a patron-sponsored program. Use soccer, use baseball, use lacrosse, use football, use tennis, there's a whole myriad of things that are typically patron-sponsored because it saves the taxpayer money of not having to do it. We may provide the facility. And if they're successful, then, well, we encourage it. But if they're not successful, then sometimes the municipality will step up and make the extra up and make it happen. So they're two separate issues.
Yeah, so as patron-sponsored programs, currently we wouldn't classify those as provided by the city, though, is that correct?
Right.
So I think the most sensible way to address this, given the way the city budget is concerned, for example, it would be to specify recreation and fitness programs provided by the Cottonwood Heights Rec Center.
Yep.
All right, can I circle back for 1 second?
Yes.
Is there a reason we ask, Cottonwood Heights has all the kinds of businesses I want it to have? Does someone want to know the answer to that here?
Well,
And if you did, what would you do? I mean, if someone said,
if I were taking a survey, I might say, hey, did you get a movie theater closer to my house? Or I would like an Marriott Cottonwood.
you would, but what action would then we take?
Well,
Well, we're planning the gravel pit, you'd advocate for the theater.
our economic development
Yeah.
focus would probably look at certain things. I mean,
So
that's how I would look at it.
you think that's a valuable question? To me, that's an odd question to ask. But if someone hears about the answer, then that's good.
We want to be open to a lot of answers, I guess, and not sure what they do. And so I think that's a valid point. If somebody says, you always have had a lot of interest in having a movie theater in your community, then if I was thinking gravel pit, I would say, well,
Keep in mind here, the answer you get to provide is strongly agree, somewhat disagree.
is there a follow-up to that question?
So that's one thing that I think we had included in a prior draft, and maybe we trimmed in the revision process, but maybe that was a little bit premature. We generally, for that business development question, will ask if residents disagree that the city does not have, or indicate that the city does not have all the businesses that they would like it to have, ask what they would like to see in the city that isn't currently available. Would that be helpful in terms of gearing up for potential economic development opportunities? And if not, is there a way that we could ask this question, or maybe trim this question so that we're making room for helpful, informative, actionable questions?
I personally think it'd be helpful if you added that, so
Okay.
you knew what people were thinking related to that.
Great.
That's my opinion.
Yeah, without that added stuff, it's really not really.
Perfect. Okay, any other comments on these first couple pages, city service valuations? Okay. After those 100-point scale city service evaluations, we allow residents sort of an open-ended box if they'd like to share an experience that they've had with city services. We don't specify whether that experience should be positive or negative, we get a little bit of both. And then we get to this renewable energy section. So what questions or comments did you have about this one? So the city of Cottonwood Heights passed a resolution earlier this year with the goal of having city functions running on renewable energy resources by 2030. Do you support or oppose this goal is the first question.
All right, so the first thing that I think is a little unclear about that, what is the 2030 date? What does the resolution say the city should try to do by 2030?
Two things. One is the city services would be on renewable energy.
You mean operations?
Operations, city service, yeah, operations, excuse me. And then the second is, the residents and businesses being part of
So
that.
this question leads me only to the first of those two ideas. City functions running on renewable energy. It doesn't cover the idea that the whole city would be on renewable energy. And so that to me, it almost begs two questions, one about the first half and one about the second.
To rectify that, you'd have to say something like city operations or functions, like it says, and,
I keep it to
All-
separate questions.
All resident,
yeah, resident and businesses.
yeah, well, yeah, all citywide
Property owners.
energy, or, you know, how, there's some way to say it, I don't know what it is, but.
I guess I'm gonna take it up a level. I guess I'd like to understand, why we're asking this question when I don't feel like, I thought we hired a sustainability person to evaluate what the costs of having us be 100% renewable. Maybe that there is no cost, or there may be a lot of cost. And so, I guess I'm struggling with this, first question, then I'm struggling with the second question, because I don't think we as a city go to our community and say, we're gonna order, two more police vehicles, or blah, 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 or whatever. I mean, this question seems to get into it takes what was a public policy decision we've made, and then we're saying, hey, do you agree with this? And if you don't, what happens if they say no? We're gonna just unravel it? And and what happens if there's no cost burden to it? Then what is that? And then it just looks really odd. So I guess I'm worried about, first, is this the right time to ask it? Do we have the right data? I don't even agree with the numbers in QR2 that we have here, 2050. It could be a savings, it could be zero. I'm struggling.
What if we reframe this entire question here and said, the city has committed to clean renewable energy, and we're moving in that direction with our partner Rocky Mountain Power. If it turns out that there is an additional cost to continue on this path, are you as a family in the city willing to, and then try to monetize it?
I just think from the perspective of, the resolution that we passed, we passed this resolution which outlines goals. I mean, it hasn't set a policy that we
Hasn't made a commitment to
or
do.
we are or not going to do it.
Yeah.
And so, I guess this question helps us understand what public sentiment is as we have these goals in place to move forward. That's my perspective with the timing of it.
We don't go out and say, hey, how about idling? Did you like our idling ordinance, or our lighting requirements? I don't know, it seems to me that if we're gonna ask this kind of question, there's probably 100 other questions like this I would like to ask. And I don't understand this.
So, let me just say this, because I think I hope that I can address this. We have set, with idling, we set a policy. It's a policy, it's code, it's in place. This is what it is. We're enforcing it, blah, blah, blah. We passed a resolution, we haven't passed code, we haven't passed the law saying that this is what we're going to do. We're working towards that with discussions with Rocky Mountain Power. This helps us understand what public sentiment is related to those goals. That's what I see the difference is.
Okay, what happens if our community comes out and says we oppose it, and then we find out that it's actually cost effective and it's gonna save money? So they oppose it, we say, okay, we're not even gonna go forward anymore because we trust you as a community, you know more than us, and we just stop. And then we find out from Salt Lake City and Summit County, wow, this just saved us money.
Yeah, this
I
doesn't.
just-
Then you
I
can
just-
re-ask the question. You're not bound in any direction because you have the
But
community feedback.
Now we're 10 steps backwards, and now we're gonna have to take 10 steps forward to convince them of the fiscal responsibility of that decision. So you've just taken what could have been an opportunity, and you flipped it on its head, and now you're gonna have to start from scratch, and not willing to do that.
Can I propose what might be a compromise solution here? So I wanna make sure that we're capturing the options in front of us and presenting the public with a complete picture or set of different pictures if there are, alternatives or unknowns at this point. So if it's helpful to understand whether the public's support hinges on whether there are costs or savings, then that's the question we should ask. We should ask, do you support or oppose this proposal or this resolution generally? Would you support it if you knew that there would be cost savings to the city and to your household? Would you support it if you knew that it would cost the city and your household additional tax dollars? And I think
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
way that
Yeah.
would give you the clearest, most actionable data if there's a chance that this doesn't cost you more, but actually saves both the city and residents money.
To that
I
point,
see your point.
I think the thing that the public is most concerned about is how are you spending my tax dollars? And are you spending them wisely? And you won't be excited to hear this, but in light of discussions that I had today with Tim and Scott, we're trying to get to a point where we can have an apples to apples comparison of our city services with our 5 closest neighbors. We're not there yet. So I feel like we should put our Y2 survey on hold until we are able to do that. And then we go to the public and say, hey, we chose to spend a little bit more and buy the snow plows. Are you happy that we did that? We have that sunken cost. Is your snow removal?
There again,
You're doing it
what would we
either
say if
way.
they said
You're
no?
not.
Oh, sorry.
No, we're not gonna.
But I'm just using snow plows as an example, but I feel like the public should know you're paying a premium in this department, we're paying a little less in this department. Do you like it that way? But then they need to know before they can say, do I like it that way or not?
See, and to me, the reason we're doing a survey, as a city, we'll come together once a year, and as a council, we have different opinions, different ideas. We're gonna set priorities for the coming year, okay? As much as we each have a relationship with our constituents, some of those relationships are different. To me, this validates some information we need as we individually, not necessarily vote, but comment as to what we feel the priorities are moving forward. I personally would like to know if they're comfortable with our direction on sustainability, okay? But again, I think the key is how you ask the question. I wanna know what some of the other priorities are. I mean, I think I know, okay, I have a general idea, but I think even as we debate it among ourselves, we have different positions. This, I think, helps validate some of those things that you have questions on. I mean, you can't be afraid to be surprised. You can't be afraid to see they may think differently. We need to have that information. And so that's what I want survey is going into our planning as a city. We have some data of some kind that helps guide it, helps you decide. Even though we are elected to make the decision, we still can. But we have one more tool of information we can use, to do. It's like we talked about in the past survey. I noticed how important open space and trails are. Well, I appreciated hearing it, okay? Even though I liked it, it met my personal goals as well. I was glad to hear that because I use that as a validation of one of my priorities. And there's others in here like that.
So, on this renewable, maybe the issue is, maybe it is premature to dive into these 2 questions at this point. Maybe it's something as we get further along with what we're working on with Rocky Mountain Power and others, that Chris was talking about back when we do the next survey in a couple of years or whatever. Maybe that would be a more opportune time. I don't disagree
I have
with
no
that.
problem pulling that one down, doing it later.
I think that you do have an actionable question here, which is maybe not the one about residence power.
Yeah.
It's the one about city's power. Because if you're going to put in place a policy that will meet that goal, today the information we have says it would be very difficult to deal with that increased cost, if I understand correctly. Is that right?
I don't know if we've determined that yet.
Well, we had.
There's 3 different choices. From my understanding, I haven't seen there's different options you could take, and I'm not sure that we've explored each of the options. So
Well,
I think that I don't think we have the data.
Maybe not. The
You're
consultant we
thinking
hired,
about got solar on a roof.
Oh,
yeah.
And what that cost is.
Yeah.
That's different than if you were to go to Rocky Mountain Power and go and subscribe to their solar subscriber program,
I didn't
that's
realize
different.
that.
If like Salt Lake
That's what I
City,
was at.
they're going and they're purchasing their power for operations in Summit County, and that's, you know, there are different options. We don't have that data yet.
We need to move along. because we
But I
have other
think, but
guests
I
here,
also
too.
think that, you know, that's the same, I mean, but that, isn't that the same question as, should we be buying our police cars for 2 years versus 3 years? And I mean, that to me seems like an analysis we need to do internally and objectively look at those costs. That's
I think here the question is more directional than it is detail. And the question asked here is maybe
the wrong question.
doesn't fit
Yes.
that bill. But directionally, do
I
the
agree,
residents
yeah, I agree.
support
That's fine.
Conceptually almost.
putting time, energy, resources, and potentially more money into sustainability?
But is it sustainability then?
Well, I don't
Maybe
know.
it should be, that's, I guess,
Yeah. No, no.
I don't know, I like the way that you offered the question. I thought that was helpful and meaningful.
Yeah, well, and certainly as the council makes further decisions and gets additional data, if it makes sense to sort of shelve this topic, this is certainly something we could revisit at a later date.
So I would like
If
hearing
rewording it
as
is
you-
more
As
helpful.
you reworded it a moment ago,
Uh-huh.
taking that direct, look at that.
Okay. I'm happy to draft up a version of the question that pursues that line,
We know
whether.
We know the issue itself is important to our constituents. We've hired an additional person to facilitate it. We have a relationship with 2 other cities on this issue. It's a top conversation. So finding the right wording, I think, could give us some valuable information, but not to represent it right. And
Okay.
that's,
We'll revisit these set of questions. Moving on to page 5, in the interest of time, we have a few questions up front here that evaluate public safety in Cottonwood Heights. So to what extent do residents agree or disagree with each of the following statements? Cottonwood Heights Police Department is too assertive on code enforcement, e.g. weeds, abandoned cars, accessory dwelling units. The Cottonwood Heights Police Department is professional and responsive. Cottonwood Heights Police Department is committed to addressing the issues that pose the biggest threats to the safety of our community. And I trust the Cottonwood Heights Police Department to deter and, when necessary, deal with crime in the city. Any questions or comments about those statements? Most of these we've tested in the city before. We've altered the wording of the first statement to reflect a lens on code enforcement rather than traffic stops, which was the largest issue around the police force a couple years ago.
Down on sustainability.
Yeah.
We pay a slight premium to have in-house police,
Mhm.
and I feel like the residents should have some say in that.
So I think that would be most reflected from the sort of 100-point score of the police department. So if residents feel that their needs are not being met, we would expect those ratings to be lower relative to other city
I think
services.
you're missing what I'm saying, though, we have in-house police instead of using UPD services.
Right.
And we pay a premium for that.
Right.
How much of a premium do they feel it's worth having that in-house control? 10%, 20%, 30%?
I think unless you have the cost difference for residents to evaluate, price sensitivity is a tricky thing to gauge. So I think telling residents that they pay a premium for something without telling them how much it would affect their individual households isn't likely to provide a lot of useful information.
That's why I think we should hold this survey for a year until we have a better idea across the board.
We'll do another one in a year.
Yeah, I would recommend conducting another survey in the year, not just out of self-interest, but in the interest of informing
6 months.
responsible public policy. I think revisiting all of these questions at the time is the reason that we try to make this type of research available and affordable, because we are passionate about public decision makers having that data available to them and being able to make those decisions based on the public's priorities and preferences. So,
Every couple of years.
I would say every couple of years, I wouldn't say every year, that's what I think.
okay.
I have a question on the first question. It says Cottonwood Heights Police Department is too assertive. Is there a reason why you would say is too assertive or
Or not
versus
assertive enough.
not assertive enough? Yeah.
So we usually like to
Be positive.
have some of these be reverse coded. So for that one, too assertive would be if residents were to agree with that statement, that would be sort of the opposite of agreeing with the other statements. It's sort of an attention and data quality check, but also helps us to make sure that we're not being accused of unfairly biasing residents in the way we're framing those statements.
Okay. And would we wanna add in this, parenthetical, short-term rentals?
We certainly could do that.
Well, it's in there, that's the question she's asking.
Well, no,
It's in there.
accessory dwelling units
Oh,
are not short-term rentals. We could
Where are you?
Oh.
In Q and force,
Q enforce.
so adding to the
So
examples provided
here,
there.
the one thing I worried about here a little bit is that I think ordinance enforcement in many people's minds is not connected to the police department, it's a different thing. And so by saying the Cottonwood Heights Police Department, I don't know if that clues people into ordinance enforcement is what we're talking about.
What to do that it is a police department.
But you're talking about the, back to the
Yeah.
education piece.
That's why they add in parentheses these ours.
Yeah, we wanna provide examples of what that would look like, I think
But
whether.
you're saying there might be a disconnect
Just,
between.
if you said ordinance enforcement somewhere in that question, I think you clarify it a little better.
Is the city slash
Code
police
or
department
ordinance
Yeah.
enforcing ordinances?
Code or ordinance enforcement?
Code or ordinance.
In the interest of time, as we go through this, are there?
Everyone.
What, everyone?
Everyone.
Well, I mean, I have 4 or 5, but I don't have a lot.
You want to go to the one question?
Yeah, I'm happy to skip ahead
Well,
to
we
where
got-
there are
we have
questions
another
and
guest,
we
we can do that.
revisit.
If we want to jump ahead, we can come back to, but, when we talk about, how residents get information,
Uh-huh.
one item that's not on here that unfortunately it should be on here is we have our still newsletter, but we piggyback that with the Cottonwood Heights Journal.
Mhm.
And I was wondering if we should add that specifically.
We can certainly add that.
So if we go to-
Cassie does a really great job at this.
Cash, you okay if we add that in there?
Just throw her name in.
And how do you like Cassie?
How do you
Yeah.
think
How do you
Cassie's
feel about
doing it?
Cassie at the Cottonwood Heights Journal?
1 to 100.
Also on page 7.
Mhm.
Can I
struck-
get one on 6 before
Yeah,
I
do
get there?
that, please, jump on that.
So in Q events, could we add something about the Arts Council production of the play?
Oh, absolutely, sure, yeah.
Yeah, well,
I don't know, what's the best way to,
See the play,
city musical production or?
annual,
Just say
Whatever it is.
Arts Council.
these are all very specific, so you want to.
Arts Council Productions, for example, City Clear
I
Musical.
think you,
To see musicals and plays.
You want to do
I'm just
all of
asking
them?
about that one
Yeah.
specific event.
Oh.
The city,
City play, Arts Council, okay.
We put a plug in for Cottonwood Heights Business Association too. They do an outreach event like every month and they do new business luncheons.
Keep in mind, this is registered voters, most of those people won't
Won't
know
be
because
business
they're gonna
owners
be
in the
businesses,
city.
unless they happen to be both.
That would be something to evaluate now, associations. On the next page 7, how would you say that each of the following statements describe the local roads? Traffic is too fast, and I say extremely well. I have a disconnect.
I had a disconnect on the school section.
I did too, because I'm not sure what too fast means. Does that mean the speed limit is too high, or people are exceeding the speed limit too regularly?
And I have a hard time saying extremely well.
They're extremely well doing that.
Speeding extremely well.
Fair enough.
I do that on the next couple, yeah.
So traffic is too fast to me.
Maybe it's almost like agree or disagree, I don't know.
Yeah, that's very.
Okay.
What, are we trying to see if the speed limit is too high or if people are exceeding it? What are we asking?
Well, I interpret as saying, if people go
that'll come up a lot in the open-ended comments about the issues facing the city. That is a trend that is not unfamiliar,
But that's a good
for this
question.
part of the valley, but if
That's a good
there's a way
question.
to address that, we have some questions about potential road improvements, but we don't have a question directly about traffic beyond this lens toward local roads in the neighborhoods where you live versus sort of arterial roads in the city.
But in the same set, we could ask about traffic congestion.
Yeah, just like you said, traffic.
It kind of
Yeah.
fits right into
Yeah.
the same
It does.
series.
Yeah, I agree.
We'll add those distinctions. Any other specific questions here? I wanna be sensitive to the other items on the agenda.
Yeah, we
So-
have somebody waiting. We appreciate the patience.
They're fascinated by this survey.
On Q allocate,
Mm-hmm.
how was the order of this determined?
So these items will be randomized, so they won't be presented to residents in that order.
Okay. Randomized on each, they randomize each time, or is the randomization one time and then not?
They will be randomly ordered for each respondent, so
They will.
no,
Good, good.
yeah,
And
no
that's
two
what
respondents
I'm
will see the
saying.
same order.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna jump ahead and I could come back to, but,
What about adding dog park to that?
it's on one of the other, it's there.
Number 18 on the Q allocate is dog park, yep.
There's one that has trail twice.
One of them has trees twice.
Trees twice, that's what it is.
Could we swap in senior center?
Oh,
That list?
Absolutely.
well.
To the allocation or to the new amenities?
The
Allocation, okay, yep.
But also you say what amenities would you like most added to improve upon
So-
parks? I notice you don't mention anything about open space amenities, soccer fields, basketball fields. These are fundamentally parts of any park. You
Mhm.
need the athletic fields. You just call them athletic fields because they're really multi-purpose.
Yeah.
And the only other one, you might as well put basketball court if it's for pickleball, volleyball, other courts.
Yeah.
The trees is in there twice.
Yep, I just replaced one of the trees with
And
athletic
going
fields.
back a page on number 9,
Yeah.
has anybody ever been to Old Mill Park? Do they know where that is? You may wanna put / Spencer's Pond, so people know where it is,
Okay.
because they don't know it's Old Mill Park. Old Mill Park / Spencer's Pond.
Right by the bridge.
Yeah. I don't know, I didn't know that was actually a park.
And then quickly on the allocation question, so, I think we had included senior services or a senior center on that allocation list at one point, but because that's not something that the city currently provides or operates, we removed it from that list, so this is looking more specifically at things that are currently included in the city budget and how residents would allocate those things, other than the creation and maintenance of a dog park, so would it be helpful to add the
Absolutely.
creation of, and, okay.
I think our demographics
Yep.
and interest, and I think Salt County Aging has raised that question too, and
Yep.
really, it needs to be in there somewhere to get a sense of feel.
Great.
And that's not because of my age.
Well, Tally's brought it up since the day she was elected.
It's
in
a
her
good
first
point.
council meeting.
Yeah, it's a valid point. yeah.
Great.
That's what I had to give another draft.
I guess I was curious, sorry. I didn't mean to
No, no,
take-
go ahead.
you go.
No, please.
Okay, I'll flip the coin.
I think, again, going back to the question about stormwater
Oh, yeah.
and the idea that we're gonna have a decision about whether to to raise taxes
Stormwater fees.
about stormwater, related to stormwater, or to use existing revenues, which would mean spending down reserves and or reducing expenditures in other areas. That's gonna be a big topic. Whenever we're talking about raising taxes, we ought to ask some questions around that, I think.
I agree.
With stormwater. Are there other questions?
Are you gonna, if we're gonna ask that, are we gonna get into more specific taxes, like this actual stormwater fee that could be implemented, or a telecom tax? Or are you thinking just more generally?
What I'm interested in is if residents think we should maintain a stormwater system, it's not a lot of room to say no to that, I guess,
Well,
at some level.
But aren't we required to, based on federal law, to have it?
We must maintain
Right.
a stormwater system.
So then we have to, the question needs to be,
Would you rather?
Given that we have to do this.
We have to do
and-
this.
And we have to, and we anticipate an increased expenditure, would you
Yes.
prefer that we use existing revenues and balance that way to impose a new tax?
Would you rather see a stormwater fee, new tax introduced, or a reduction in services elsewhere?
Yep. And I think, for me, I would have a list of specific services that I'd pick to be reduced, because I think people would pick them, but maybe that's a little too much.
And I would even add it to that list of,
For the budget allocation?
Yeah.
Yep.
I'd
No
add-
one will pick it there, though, you have to ask the question specifically enough.
But I would use that as a cross.
Now, you'll have 3 or 4 residents that would pick that.
Yes, there are a few right now who will take that, if you happen to ask the right people.
It's like emergency preparedness and street lighting and sidewalk maintenance. I think it fits in those, and I would like to see if people pull that out, we can cross that, check it out.
My point is not that you shouldn't put it there, but that you
But that we
also
also
must put
need
it
a
somewhere
trade-off
else.
question, yep. Happy to address that. Are there any other questions?
of course.
Okay.
There are 3 questions on the dog park.
Mhm.
Would you support or oppose the development of a dedicated off-leash dog park in Cottonwood Heights? Do we wanna add something like 1 acre, half an acre, quarter of an acre, or just, do you support it? Because the second one then says, in close proximity to your neighborhood.
Mhm.
I feel like that's just begging everybody to say, I oppose that. I can't think of very many people that are gonna say, oh yeah, I want one next to my house.
Unless you're a dog owner, maybe.
So that's getting at the percentage of dog owners we have in our,
We asked that question too, don't we?
So I think we do actually ask whether you are a dog owner in the demographic section. The goal here is
what's the goal?
to sort of uncover broad support and whether that NIMBY sentiment is particularly pervasive on the topic. So if there's a pocket of residents who are really passionate about having a dog park, even if it is in their neighborhood, that's helpful to know.
So I guess from our perspective, when we get the answer to this, how does that change our course of action?
Well, if we get a dog park, we have to look at it somewhere, obviously, so. I don't know.
Well, to me, how I would use it is,
Yeah.
if we've got broad-based support, and where that is, that, tells me when we set our priorities, that's.
Yeah, but
If we have broad-based support though, and no in my neighborhood support, then what it tells us is that we should fill it in sand.
Or you get the one person that said, yeah, it could be next to me, we go to that neighborhood and blame it on that one family. Could we add a middle, like neutral, in between somewhat support, somewhat opposed?
We can. My question is, what are you gonna do with that portion of neutral responses? So I think if you think about it, if it appeared on a ballot, someone can't vote neutral. They can either not vote or they can state an opinion. And we're giving them even a soft support and opposition category. So I usually lean against a neutral category unless we're looking at an agree to disagree scale where there really is a neutral point. But in questions of support or opposition, you either have an opinion or you don't, and if they don't, they can skip the question.
I would actually be interested in another question here too, which is, if you support this idea, how would you propose the city pay for it? Would you be willing to pay for it by increased taxes, by eliminating some other service in
Isn't that
its
already
place?
here?
Not when it relates to dog parking, so.
So we have the creation of a dog park in the budget allocation question, but it isn't an explicit trade-off the
Trade-off
way
question.
you mentioned for stormwater fees, for example.
That makes the assumption though, that the only way you could do that is if you find money to then buy a parcel and blah, 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 where I think there's opportunities that it should cost very little in our city. I can think of 10 locations I could put up, just small fence, if you half the size, couple rooms, 2 rooms this size, put a little fence and some grass, done. Off-leash dog park.
Maybe.
Well, then that raises to your question about maybe putting size in there, because when I think of dog parks, I think minimum is a couple acres.
I was in Fort Collins a few weeks ago, took a picture of a dog park, and it was between sort of like Target and our party store. And there was grass
No, I've
there,
seen it, yeah.
right? It's just grass, and they had a fence, and
Yeah.
it was, you know, in and amongst that kind of area. It had-
New York
it had
City,
grass.
New York City's got some good like that.
Yeah, so
They're
I mean,
smaller.
I don't know, I would just hate to see the response on this when we could do something so innocuous and so, you know, in that particular location or wherever, something like that, where, you know.
That's part of the definitional problem here, is dog park has such a wide range of definitions. You know, it might mean kennel park,
Right.
or it might mean the one in Fort Collins. And when you say dog park, you have to bet on what people are thinking.
Because also, from my understanding, if you start separating big dogs, and little dogs, we start going down to size of parks too.
Anyway, I'm done, sorry.
No.
This question always worries me a little bit. If you said, would you support or oppose the development of Disneyland in Cottonwood Heights? Sure, that would be great. You have to know what the trade-off is to support it. And so, do you want something that seems really nice? Yeah, unless it costs way too much or the trade-off is too big, and then I don't. That's why I think the neighborhood question is important to me. If you're not willing to make that trade-off, then it tells you how much you want it.
But we're not monetizing all the other questions.
Yeah, we're not monetizing here either, partly because I think we could certainly, you know, gauge willingness to pay. There are a variety of question structures that we could use here. The question is whether the city is currently looking for a sense of direction or if there's a specific proposal in front of us. So usually we would suggest testing price sensitivity, sort of a cost threshold, if there is a specific parcel of land that is potentially considered for acquisition or a potential development in front of you. That's the time when we would gauge that price sensitivity. If you're just looking at whether or not this is something that the city should pursue and gather data about, I would say this general support or oppose question is the right construct for the time being.
So next month, the Parks, Trails, and Open Space Committee is gonna make a recommendation on the location of a dog park. How does that interface with these questions?
What's your possibility?
I don't understand. Wait.
For the Park Trails and Open Space to make the recommendation on the site. Because that's gonna change, like you were saying.
And then change the question to be specific to that
Yeah.
proposal.
proposal.
We'll have a better idea of its size and proximity to neighbors and whether this is relevant.
Yeah, I don't know, we'll have to evaluate costs and a variety of different things related to that recommendation, which will take a little bit of time as well.
So that, we're trying to get the responses back before our retreat? That's the goal?
Well,
like to.
it'd be nice to have that, I think, if we debate our priorities, and now instead of dog park or this, then we start looking at budget allocations and goal setting, we wanna know where that fits in.
So remind me what the timing of this is, we're gonna get this out.
Well,
That's the plan, right?
But we just-
what I think, and we still have another round of taking
Yep.
this input tonight and then bringing it back to the council in time to finalize it, and then we can move forward with it fairly quickly, right?
Yep,
Irene?
that's
So,
correct.
this isn't the last opportunity you're gonna get, we'll see it again.
We'll probably have one more, hopefully we do one more in the next year.
Yep. Yep, that would be the goal. So, our revision process after this meeting can be pretty quick. We could turn this around and certainly come back for the next council meeting. We would want to either, we sort of have two options in front of us. We would want to be in and out of the field prior to Thanksgiving, or we would want to wait until the first of the year.
Before
And-
Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I think those are kind of the ultimatums that we're faced with. Once you get past Thanksgiving, it's difficult, if not impossible, to get people to respond to public information gathering efforts. So we would plan to present hopefully a finalized draft at the next council meeting, at which point we could pretty quickly get this into the field. And again, we would expect a 7 to 10 day fielding period for
Could we
that.
have a draft moved into the council, how soon again, even though, will we have a chance to review them quickly? Yeah.
We could, if it works for you, Irene, we could have the draft prepared to you a week in advance of the November 5th meeting, which would be roughly in the council packet or a little bit before the council packet. Does that work?
That's for me.
Which would be, next week sometime.
Yeah, so your next meeting is November 5th. Okay.
And
Yeah.
the other thing, Mayor, Scott Bracken, it would give him opportunity to look at this. He had indicated some issues with the dog parks and things like that, but it would give him an opportunity to weigh in as well, so I feel good about having to do that.
Are the questions that you've, used for the dog park, are those questions that you've used with other cities?
We have not used these specific questions in other cities.
Okay, have you asked similar questions with other cities about dog parks, and can you send us possibly how those were worded? Or-
The dog park questions that we've asked in other cities have been more focused on, so where we have additional amenities in existing parks, the off-leash dog area, or from a list of potential investments the city could make in parks and open spaces, including a dog park as one of those potential investments. Those are some of the ways we've asked about it in the past. Addressing the concept directly like this is specific to Cottonwood Heights right now. But I'm happy to take the feedback from tonight and send a revised draft around, or send a revised draft over to Tim by the end of this week. And then you'll have, a week plus to
Yeah.
go over things prior to the next council meeting.
And our goal at that council meeting would be to try and finalize.
I could send that council communication. So Friday I send that out in the afternoon.
Okay. Great. All right.
I've been thinking about it, if the Parks Trail Open Space Committee has a recommended site, we may want to look at specifically asking for feedback on that site, we want to go that specific.
You're gonna have a tough time with the timing there,
When do they meet? Next week?
because
They're coming to they would like to make a recommendation on the 5th.
Oh, they'll vote
So vote.
before next week.
But it sounded like Tim said that the staff would need to do some work before.
Well, I mean, we'd have to, I would hope that we would be able to understand the costs and things like
I
that.
can't imagine it's gonna take much to make the existing location, you're gonna smack a fence around it and then call it good.
Yeah, we can see how.
That presumes you know how they'll vote.
I don't, I'm just saying, if they voted that way, that,
The proposed is
there's a
the-
one proposed location. So if that gets passed and they make that recommendation that they'd like to put it there, that's, I know the location, I know what they're gonna, I know,
So Tim can
What's-
potentially do some work on it now.
we'll have time between when the purchase of the
Well, we'll have
committee
chance.
meets and when our council meeting is. Right, Mike?
We're putting together some numbers. I don't think it's quite that simple, but it's looking at different materials and treatment and maintenance over time.
All right, we do need to move ahead.
Yes. Thank you for your time and feedback. We'll be in touch with an updated draft.
Lorraine, thank you for your
Thank
patience.
you.
and-
Of course. My pleasure.
I like your shoes.
Thanks.
Ralph, well, thank you so much for, you didn't expect that to go quite that long, but
Sorry
appreciate
for
the
holding you
patience.
up.
Allowed you to reminisce of your days at some city council meetings, yeah.
It brings back so many fond memories.
Oh, yeah.
So is there, where's the best dog park in Salt Lake City?
What's that?
Where's the best dog park in Salt Lake City?
Tanner Park.
No way.
Tanner Park.
It's Cottonwood.
Tanner Park's 100 acres. Okay?
But you're overrun with dogs there. Cottonwood on Redwood, there's not a lot of
There you go.
dogs.
So
It's
there you go.
grass.
Cottonwood.
Actually,
What dog park in Cottonwood?
It's called Cottonwood Park on Redwood Road about,
Oh, Redwood.
it's right
Yeah.
where the Department of Agriculture
Yeah.
building
Yeah.
is,
Right
Redwood
by the
Road and
river.
North Temple.
It's like, I think,
on the
it's like
river.
you're talking big.
That's actually, that's a really nice park.
Yeah.
So
check
we
your
went-
maps.
Anyway, we could talk dogs all day. I know how this works.
Constitutional Park, remember that one they put right in the middle of four ball diamonds, and it was strange.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, hey, just for the record, real quickly, I forgot to excuse Councilman Bracken, who is not with us this evening, and, so, wish him well. All right, Blake, Ralph, you're gonna.
Yeah, I'll take over.
Talk about the Central Wasatch Commission and Wasatch Boulevard Transit.
Cool. I'd like to first thank you all for having us. First and foremost, I do want to thank Cottonwood Heights and Mayor Peterson for their continued support and involvement with the Central Wasatch Commission. Such great partners to work with. Thanks to Tim and Mike and their constant support and partnership. We're really happy to be here. So let's get started. We're here today to discuss some of our transportation improvement opportunities. I don't know who's controlling the, okay, cool. Cool, yeah, you can go to the next one. But we're also here, we're here to discuss the actions that we've been taking over the past couple of months, opportunities that we've been pursuing, and we want to share that with Cottonwood Heights. We're also here to request that Cottonwood Heights City Council consider providing some financial support for some of the transit improvements that we are pursuing. So what I'm here today, oh, could you go back just one more? Today, back. One more. Today, we're going to focus a lot on the first two, the transit service solutions and congestion management solutions for transit. I want to just give you a quick overview of what the car rental partnership and evaluate the traction and policy ordinances. So one of the concerns brought to us was about car rentals. Visitors to our region are getting cars that may not meet current policy and ordinances when they're going up the canyon. So we've begun discussions with car rental agencies about education for their clients and also providing them opportunities if they're going up the canyon and they're turned around by UPD because they don't have snow tires. That's a terrible vacation. So we want to be able to provide for them what options they have if their car can't get up to the ski resort. We've had a really good conversation with Enterprise. We'll be talking with Hertz in the coming weeks and really strengthening that partnership. They're interested in maybe providing, when people are checking their cars out, letting them explicitly know the rules and the ordinances, but also then providing them their options, maybe doing a laminate in each of the car rentals as well. And then evaluate traction policy and ordinances. That's a partnership between UDOT and UPD. Some of the current traction policies may seem a little light, and the enforcement may not, it may be light. So those are just some of the things that we're working on in addition to the top two things. And that's what
we're talking about there is snow tires.
Snow tires. Snow tire enforcement. We've been working really collaboratively and closely with UTA over the past couple of months. UTA, we've come up with two kind of service improvement solutions that we'll be implementing this year. The first one is on Route 972. And what UTA suggested is eliminating the Bingham Junction track stop. Now that is all the way kind of on the west side of the route. The current 972 goes to Bingham Junction and then Midvale. So they're talking about eliminating that stop. And what that does will increase the number of one-way trips from 61 weekday, 65 on Saturday, and 60 day on Sunday to 79 each day of the week. That is an increase of 121 trips a week going up the canyon. And just to let you know, this one does serve Big Cottonwood Canyon. So that's a 28% increase. Doing some math, that could potentially take 150 cars off of the road, depending, or using average number of boardings from last winter for this route. With the 121 new trips, if we're using last year's numbers, which is about 26 boardings a day, times that by 121, we could potentially take off 150 cars with this particular service increase. There are some things to consider. UTA's brought that out. 10% of their boardings are at the Bingham Junction station. So that's an education piece with UTA, ski resorts, and Central Wasatch Commission. What is needed to do this? Approximately $50,000 to continue to pursue this strategy.
Why is that costly? It's odd to me that eliminating a stop is costly.
It will probably add, since you're adding more trips, we're going to be adding more drivers potentially, so you're adding more trips to go up. Just eliminating that will add efficiencies.
And it's also, I think it's true for both of the changes for bus routes. It's also that there will be trips all day long. So now what they do is they've got trips in the morning at the peak, then they send their buses back, and then they send them back to meet the peak times. This will be a continuous flow of buses all day long.
And also, I think because of some of the odd numbers, is because some of the trips will strictly be coming from the top down,
Or
not
from
stopping going up.
Anyway,
Deadhead.
we had the same
It's
questions.
more than one thing, I guess.
Yeah.
It's not just about elimination, but also.
Yep.
Yeah, we had the same questions, but they explained it.
And with the next route, so Route 972 runs along the northern border of Cottonwood Heights, and so we're anticipating, and how the impacts for Cottonwood Heights with this route is that, well, obviously there'll be more service, but reducing congestion at Big Cottonwood Canyon if we're potentially taking that many cars off the road at the mouth of the canyon.
And they're parking.
We're going to be taking an approach this year to educate people on other parking lots that people can go to outside of the mouth of the canyon. There's going to be a big effort to educate people, to send people to other parking lots that have the capacity to do so. Yeah. Next one, 953. I think this one is the most exciting for Cottonwood Heights. The 953 is the one that goes, I believe that is the one that goes along Wasatch Boulevard, up Little Cottonwood Canyon. So this is really where the epicenter of where your congestion is in your community. So what they're looking at is additional service and minimizing that deadhead time. That's exactly what Ralph was talking about. Deadhead time is when the buses are moving without any passengers. So they're going to kind of try and make some more efficiencies within that and eliminate that deadhead, but add more service as well. So they're increasing one-way trips from 17 weekday, 23 weekend to 35 all week, every single day. 7 days a week, there'll be 35 trips on 953. So that goes from 131 trips to 245 trips a week, an increase of 114 trips, or an 87% increase in trips going up the canyon. If you geek out a little bit and go into the numbers, it's pretty amazing what that means. So like I said earlier, they were averaging, the 953 averages about 39 boardings per trip. It's a lot higher than the 972, right? So there's what, 114 more trips. So if there's 114 more trips a week, you times that by 39, you come up with about 4,400 new people boarding a week.
That assumes that you still board at the same rate, even though there are a lot more buses.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of assumptions, but the potential is really big, and we had a lot of excitement from the ski resorts about this. In my short time with CWC, I haven't seen the ski resorts get excited about something like this than anything else.
You think dog parks are exciting?
So this potentially, they're on, in some studies, the average amount of people per car is 2.7 people per car going up. Then I divided that, and we're looking at reducing on Wasatch Boulevard with this, potentially, a lot of assumptions, 235 cars a day being taken off of Wasatch and onto the buses.
And I assume too, if this is implemented, which it will be obviously, that the data will be gathered to evaluate the effectiveness of the care.
Yeah, and UTA just rolled out, and just to let you know, this is open, UTA just rolled out an open data portal for everybody to see. And so I was able to pull a lot of the data that they had from last year right on their website. So I encourage you all to look at that. But yes, Mayor, we're gonna keep close tabs on this. You compound that over a season, that's 26,000 cars over the season, over 4 months. That's a lot on wear and tear on your roads. That improves air quality, improves congestion. So these were two big service improvements that UTA and CWC had identified, and we really wanted to pursue this. Now, what is needed to do that? UTA came back with $100,000 to implement those service changes. Next slide, please. Okay, so like I said, we're going to talk about the budget. To implement both of those services, it would cost approximately $150,000 to deliver that service enhancement. Central Wasatch Commission recently approved, committed up to having $60,000 going to that cost. It was a really great opportunity that our chair and commission members wanted to pursue. So they all approved moving forward with that. Now we are going out to member jurisdictions to help offset some of that cost. So my request to Cottonwood Heights City Council is to consider an $8,000 one-time contribution to service enhancements. How we are looking to build a stronger coalition and to deliver the service. We have some interest within our stakeholders council from the conservation and recreation groups who would like to participate and contribute. Our goal is $20,000 from that group. We have some soft commitments from ski resorts about contributing to this service as well. And our goal with the ski resorts is a $20,000 contribution. And then UTA will cover the remaining costs to deliver it this year. And I think the really great thing is that they will absorb all of the costs next year and moving forward. So this is a one-time investment to make sure that this service enhancements goes on for this year and for however long UTA has these routes in service.
Some of the other members of CWC are looking, like hopefully Cottonwood Heights, at making contributions as well. Alpha Town has said they think they can do it. Sandy is looking at it as well. Salt Lake County is looking at it, but we'll get to another item in a minute that they're looking at making an additional commitment on that be of real value to everybody as well, so. And we're talking to the other jurisdictions as well. We don't expect people from the Wasatch back, Summit County, Park City, this obviously doesn't give them a direct benefit, but, the other jurisdictions seem to be interested.
Except when they're tourists come over here because they like the city better.
Yeah, I'll just say they've got enough of their own issues that,
So, I'm sorry, so adding the math, so you have 60, 70, 80, 100, so you're, am I reading it wrong?
I think that 20 and 20 is not part of the 60.
No, that would be, in addition to.
The stakeholder is 20 and the SKUs are 20 is in addition to the 60?
no, well, so in, tell me if I've got this right, Blake, but, so, the cost by UTA's estimation was $150,000. Then as they put a fine pencil to it, they said, we can do this, we think, for 120.
Right.
If we can get contributions from others. Well, you know, this was on a Monday night, and they needed a decision by Tuesday. Originally it was on like a Friday or Thursday, and they needed a decision by Monday just to be able to implement the service that quickly for this winter. So they went to the ski areas, they went to some of the jurisdictions, and said, can you guys come up with a match? We'll see if we can come up with UTA. By the end of the day on Monday, no one had been able to come up with the money except UTA said, we think we can do it for 120 instead of 150, and we'll come up with our share. Blake got the great idea. It's like, well, maybe since we can't get the other jurisdictions, and this would be a really valuable improvement for everybody, we can take money out of our CWC reserves and then go to the jurisdictions when they have more time to consider it and see if they'll help backfill, basically, the CWC reserves. So we called every one of the commissioners and got approval to take that out of CWC reserves. So now it's like we're at the backfill stage. for
My
CWC.
understanding is that we did that, and
Right.
if
That
no
was right.
jurisdiction comes forward, CWC will help it.
That's right.
So no one is
Okay.
committed.
That's
So-
The other thing, though, let me say, I'm sorry, but I understood the contribution from, the total contribution was 60,000.
That's
And
my
that
understanding.
therefore, the ski resorts participation or stakeholders was part of the 60. You're saying that's not the case?
That's, I mean,
So
I
it's-
didn't envision it that way because we were trying to get to closest to 120,000 as possible. And UTA, we're moving forward with this, and so we still have time to finalize what the final contribution is. It's scalable is what UTA has indicated to me. So if we're only able to come up with 90,000, they'll scale it to that service level.
Okay, so.
But they've told
60-20.
us with us coming up with the 60,000, they'll be able to make the service improvements. Right? UTA.
I don't, so again, this is scalable. If we came with 60, they would probably match not like completely, the 150,000 level. From what I was told is if we come with 120, they would fill the gaps at that point. Closer to 100, they would be able to fill the gaps. So that's why I have UTA as kind of they're contributing some resources on their end to fulfill this service delivery.
Okay, so you have 60, 20, and 20.
100.
So 100, so where are you imagining the other 20,000 comes from?
UTA.
UTA,
Yep.
okay, and so of that 60, you're looking for other entities, members of the CWC, not the backside, to backfill that. Can we then go back to the legislature and ask for our money to be backfilled? Through our lobbyists?
Okay.
This is a regional issue.
Oh, yeah,
This-
absolutely.
These cars are,
Well, this-
the problem is not us, largely, it's a regional issue, and I just think that if we're committing it, I still think, yeah, UTA is kind of helping, they're backstopping 30 grand or something like, or 60, 70, 80, 100, 50 grand, I don't know.
Yeah, they've been very cooperative. and
They've been
that's-
helpful, and that's great.
That's why it's a 1-year thing, and after this year, they've got it. They cover the whole thing. They just saying, if we want it now immediately, you know, because something like this, I thought it was just the 60, but I appreciate I may have misunderstood the other two contributions. But I agree, my exact same spot. It's a regional issue. And that's why I think Salt Lake County has to be a major player, because it's their canyons, you know, and, so I wanna see that as well. And we want, not me personally, we wanna do our part. I know the city of Alta is saying, because they directly involved more than others, I think what I heard is 5,000 from them, and I don't know about the other cities as well.
Can you give us those numbers, so 5,000 from Alta?
That's the only one I've heard.
I wanna go to the member jurisdictions of who the service is and ask at that 8,000 level for Alta and Sandy.
So the same
Cottonwood
for
Heights,
everybody.
yeah. Maybe
A
not
little
for
bit
Mill
more.
Creek or Salt Lake, it's not.
Maybe Salt Lake
visually-
County comes up with the.
Salt Lake County, and that's gonna come up a little bit more, they've kind of, identified some other things that they would like to put their resources towards, and I'll go over that in a moment, yeah. But
Okay.
it complements this very nicely.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions on the
Go
budget?
ahead, yeah.
Okay, next one, please. So in addition to these service improvements, UTA has come up with a congestion mitigation plan for their buses. There's a number of things that impact their ability to deliver the services that they have budgeted. One of those things is eliminating the interior ski racks. That slows their process down to get buses up and down the canyon. People have to walk, put their skis and snowboards in the racks, and then when it stops, they have to get them out. So now everybody will be holding them. The next one is working with the ski resorts on their PM traffic control assistance. The buses are having a lot of difficulty getting out of the ski resorts during the PM crunch peak time. So we're looking to the ski resorts to allow for us to give transit a little bit more priority and help getting out of the ski resorts. The next one is where the county is very interested in providing some resources, and that's with this police escort idea. The concept is being able to provide a police escort for buses up to the mouth of the canyon. So they are just not in the way of traffic, and they have priority going up the canyon. I've had initial conversations with Chief Russo, with Sandy PD, UPD, and UTA PD about what it's gonna take to do this. And where we're at right now is developing basically the resources, the budget required to deliver this service. And that is where the county's interest lies, is providing that service for.
So the county would provide that service and not us?
They would provide the resources to
The
deliver.
resources for it, because UPD is
Funded.
fully occupied up in the canyon. Sandy City has told us in a meeting last Friday that they will do it on the Sandy side, so the 9400 south side. And then they're looking to others, and obviously one's pointing to Cottonwood Heights, because this is Cottonwood Heights domain, to see whether or not Cottonwood Heights might fill this piece of it with some financial help. This is where Salt Lake County is looking into providing financial assistance to be able, because it takes 2 patrol officers to do the escort service. One to hold up the traffic, coming down, if you're going up in the morning, holding up, and the other to escort the buses around.
There's still a lot of logistics that would have to be worked out on the spacing even on the road, and am I correct on that?
Yeah, apparently Sandy City's been doing this on their side for residents and for school buses on these crazy snow days.
You can see 94, a little bit easier.
Yeah, it might be.
Because of the distance that, Wasatch Boulevard, I don't know, Robbie, how do you functionally see something like this?
You know, we want to help. I'm just trying to work out the logistics and wrap my head around that. I'm just trying to envision. First of all, I'm not sure. I had the same talk with UPD and Plan today. We're not sure. We'd like to run it by the DA's office because we're not sure we actually have the authority to use public safety equipment to run lights and siren on a non-public safety issue to escort buses up the canyon. I'm just trying to think of all those other residents in District 4
Well,
who are
not
going to be
only that,
really
you
mad at
want
me
that.
by making them stop and pull over. And then do we run, on Wasatch, do you run in the opposite lane of traffic and get them
I think
pulled
that's the way
over?
we've heard it described.
And who do you use to,
Well, they've stopped the traffic at the head of where, this is the way I understand it, the way it's been described to us. So for traffic coming down the canyon, for coming down Wasatch Boulevard, which is a very limited number in that peak hour or so. They would stop the traffic while they're escorting a bus up to the front of the line of the traffic.
So nobody
they
would,
stop the
nobody
down
would be
canyon
northbound
traffic.
on Wasatch. You'd stop the traffic northbound,
Yeah.
and then you'd have to have one or two cars escort buses in that northbound lane.
One time every 15 minutes, when a bus, that's the bus schedule.
And we've kind of narrowed down the times to about 6 to 10 on those 20 to 30 days a year. That's kind of how we've been approaching this.
So every 15 minutes you shut it down for 6 to 10 minutes, is that what I understand?
I don't know how long it would be
It's longer than
to
6
run
to
it.
10 minutes. Because he's talking about moving it from the park and ride on the holiday side, all the way up to the mouth of the canyon.
I thought it was from, well, wherever it
The
is.
swamp,
That-
the swamp lot.
The swamp.
In the map that UTA sent to us, it starts at the swamp lot.
Being on the south side?
Where it goes from 2 to 1
Where,
lane is.
where Wasatch narrows.
Yeah, that's on the map that they have sent me. I believe that is where they have that section of Wasatch from that area to the mouth of the canyon.
Okay, so how do I get from the park and ride where the bus stops, right? To there?
You mean from the park and ride?
Yeah, because
At Big Cottonwood.
yeah. The problem is Big Cottonwood, not Little Cottonwood. I mean, it's
Okay,
probably
well,
one track,
conceptually,
right?
there's a lot of detail here that
Yeah.
we need to be discussed, and I think Robbie has some questions, and
And
We all-
so, I think what is important to know here, that's where the county is interested in pursuing. We're still flushing through details on that, and it's going to require some coordination amongst a few of the police departments. And we're working through that. Go ahead.
Does that mean that help there, if the county wants to help there, does that imply that the two agencies that have that jurisdiction would pick up anything but the help? Is that what you're implying, or is that help sufficient to cover the full cost of it? Is that what you're pursuing?
So what Sandy has told us, and what we're trying to collect is, so what's out there now, your base service on these days, and what would it take, what would it require, resources-wise, bodies-wise, to deliver this service? And the county would cover that gap. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
it seems to me it would be more than the two vehicles.
It
Seems like
it
they
is
have
more,
one-
I think it is more than the two vehicles.
That's what I'm saying, it sounds like
And-
it could be 4 or 5.
And so that's why we're asking each of the jurisdictions to maybe consider they do
Yeah.
one area, and the county would fill those gaps accordingly with each of the jurisdictions.
'Cause we're a small,
Not only that, but it's on really busy days where you have people called out anyway to come.
Called out and we're driving the snowplows.
Yeah, but aren't they just saying they're gonna commit to paying for extra
Like
overtime?
overtime traffic,
Yeah.
it would be overtime.
Good question.
Yeah.
And the Utah Transit Authority police are also looking at what it would cost them to bring in some people who wouldn't otherwise be on duty. Because they get filled up on snow days too, completely crushed.
They do.
Huh?
Yeah, I'm sure they do.
And so what they're gonna also look at what it would cost for them to bring in some people for overtime to help with that as well.
so I guess where we are, we only have a couple minutes because we have to go to another meeting at 7, so I'm assuming, Blake, you'll continue to dialogue with the police chief. and look
Absolutely.
at the
Yep.
information and the logistical challenges, and Robbie, you'll look at that and communicate with them. And
We're trying to move as fast as we can on
Yeah,
that, so.
we appreciate it. I applaud you for your efforts. I know that for one, months ago, spoke about things CWCC can do on the interim in addition to legislation, so I applaud the efforts, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, and we'll keep you all posted as that comes, and Chief Russo will do the same. The other thing that I wanted to point out was eliminating Little Cottonwood Canyon Park and Ride lot.
As
A congestion mitigation.
a
piece.
bus stop.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just give-
not the lot, oh my, park and ride. Yeah, the stop itself. The buses have a lot of issues making the left-hand turn, going against the
And there's a
downhill
major,
traffic.
and there's a major area just below there that can be used.
So yeah, UTA has provided with us with a lot of data. They feel really comfortable that the lot at 9400 South and 20th East can accommodate that new demand. So that was one item that they suggested, an additional item that they had. Next one, please. I want to thank you for last week's Canyons Traffic Open House, and thank you for inviting us. There were, as you all know, there were so many great suggestions about how the congestion was impacting your neighborhoods. These were some of the suggestions that I heard, and that I have them on my radar, and we are incorporating them kind of into our workflow, and how, as we move forward with some of our transportation opportunity improvements, we really want to incorporate these to make sure that people who are living on Wasatch and in your community are getting taken care of as well. Working with Tim and Mike, we're really interested in improving the parking at the parking ride stations, exploring new opportunities for people to park in different parts of your community. We will have a dialogue with UTA about direct service to each of the resorts. And you can see the big one for me was safe patches for residents and students and school buses. That's a really important key. So it's on our radar. We heard it. We are grateful for the opportunity to be here and to listen to that. You know, there were some really big ideas about rail up the canyons and all of that. Thank you for that opportunity, and it is on our minds, and we will be trying to incorporate that into our workflow.
Blake and Ralph, and for the council now, the 1st of November, the CWC will have a retreat, and we'll obviously set goals and priorities moving forward. But just maybe give us a sampling of your thinking. Is there a strategy in your mind to involve the state legislature in any of these resolutions or remedies going forward?
So far, we have been responding to the legislature's intense interest in the legislation, the congressional legislation. And I've been on the phone today, there's a meeting tomorrow up on the Hill on that side of things. The transportation side, we do now have a lobbyist for the state, and I know you all do as well. It's a different person, but they all know each other well up there. So if there's some things that are decided to pursue in this next session financially for transportation improvements, some interim improvements, obviously there was the gravel pits parking area acquisition last year, but we'll be happy to see what we can do to support it.
So thanks again. That was a really great open house. We heard a lot of great things. Next slide, please. And then finally, Ralph and I wanted to include this long-term transportation outlook and why we are pursuing this. We feel that this investment definitely follows suit with the principles of the Mountain Accord that Cottonwood Heights was a part of. It is providing sustainable transit choices to connect people with the mountains, improving transit services to the mountain destinations. It doesn't hit on all of them, but we worked within a few months' time to deliver this service, and we still have the other principles from the Mountain Accord that are on our radar and that we are trying to improve and implement as well. So I just wanted to bring that up and make sure that we all kind of are grounded in the Mountain Accord principles, and that's why we're pursuing them. Ralph, did you have anything else that you wanted to add on to that?
No, I think as most of you know, I know Mayor Peterson, we've discussed with him quite a bit. The Cottonwood Canyons Transportation Action Plan, which was focused more on Big Cottonwood Canyon and some of the support work around things like tolling, that has been terminated by UDOT. They're folding everything into the Little Cottonwood Canyon EIS from that, or at least some of the things into that, and we'll be intensively involved in trying to make sure that we're looking comprehensively at the transportation improvement piece, short-term, medium-term, long-term.
All right, we have about 2 minutes because we've got to go through the agenda side.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Final questions
Yeah.
to Blake and Ralph from the council? We'll keep you informed. And
Thanks for having us.
You know where to find us?
Yep.
Yeah, thanks for your
Thanks.
patience today.
Yep.
And just an FYI, UDOT has its consultants in there.
We're
It's
gonna
kind of
drop in
interesting.
and
Yeah, I know
observe.
already. It's interesting.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, bring your attention back to the agenda. We need to review the business meeting agenda. We have that before you. We have two standing quarterly reports. We have a financial report from Scott. And then we have UFA report from Chief Watson. Any comments right now on that here? Then we have, looks like 3 action items. We have our proposed ordinance for outdoor lighting. Mike, can you just kind of walk through that real quickly?
Yeah, so this is action on the outdoor lighting ordinance we've presented to the council a number of times now. If you remember at the last meeting, we focused on the residential lighting standards, and the direction we heard there was we wanted to make these outdoor lighting standards requirements in residential zones, but only for new construction or for additions or add-ons or expansion of uses. And in that case, we would only make these requirements for that newly added portion. So the requirements, as Matt has previously explained, are a little more technical, a little more demanding for commercial developments. They've been designed to have a similar effect, but be a little more practical and reasonable for residential applications. We hadn't heard any follow-up from the council between the last meeting and now, so that is the language incorporated into the ordinance for action tonight. The other thing it does in the draft ordinance, there's
Is actually a policy, or is it a resolution?
It's a resolution.
There's the changes from 2032 to 2030 to put us in line with House Bill 411.
411, yeah.
That only changes just the.
That's it, just the one number.
And just the one number, everything else, all the language is exactly the same.
That's
what this
this
was.
step.
This is the first step, and then there's a lot of, we can send you the PowerPoint from last time, it's laid out pretty clearly. There's a lot of steps that are still being formulated, but we can't even opt into that if we don't amend the resolution.
This is our opt-in, this is that coming into compliance before that.
Okay, and Andy and Samantha presented that to us last time in detail, I think we all discussed it. Item 4.3 is the ratifying the membership of the City Parks, Trails, and Open Space Committee. Tim, you want to?
This is just a cleanup. The last resolution where we extended some terms, a few committee members that had previously resigned from the committee, their names kind of snuck back on the document. We've just removed those and cleaned it up. No changes, just cleaning up the formal resolution.
So it's just a corrective action?
Yeah.
Then we have an appointment to the Historic Committee, and I don't know who this person is.
Yeah, it's Beverly Beckstead, and she's, anyway, I've interviewed her, she's very excited to serve. She has experience in a number of volunteer areas, is from this area, has worked and lived here for quite some time, and should be a good addition.
And the
to the board.
committee proposes her as well, or they met her in the next year?
They have not met her, but, they have met her. We don't usually do that. Typically, it's
Well, I
appointment
just-
myself.
I know it's your appointment.
She was recommended by Max Evans and another member.
That's, okay.
That's
so
what I meant,
Yeah.
but they,
Yeah, she was recommended by them.
okay, that helps.
I didn't realize that. Oh, but this is that, okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any questions on those 4 action items? Now, in the meeting, Mike, can you want to introduce the outdoor lighting one then? We'll get ready there, and Sam, you also want to introduce the sustainable energy, we'll explain that really quickly. And, actually, the next one as well.
Sure.
Yeah, just.
I'll be here all night.
Well, since you're busy, okay. I'm sorry to say this to you, but you're gonna have to come back in here for a few minutes after the business meeting, it'll be pretty quick, I think, and look at the budget amendment. Is that all right with you?
And with the budget amendment, we're obviously not considering it tonight. We'll have, but we wanted to share it with you because we need to go into a public notice of the budget, and it will come
unless you feel you can do it in 5 minutes.
Nope.
I would think
You
so.
can't. Unless you figure it out.
That's what I.
We went to it quick and it was a half an hour.
I jumped to a conclusion, but I want to give you the option to talk about it. All right, we'll adjourn to our business meeting at 7 o'clock.